Night Watch on 2UE with Les Thompson. This was Sydney last night.
The first fire started down there.
The
furniture factory, and now it's all of a sudden somebody flew out of the restaurant and said, "We're on fire, we're on fire." So
this is the pizza place across the road.
Yeah,
I've just seen
restaurant.
two firemen go through the windows up there. This is above the real estate agent.
Too.
Yeah.
The police are up there investigating to see if it was deliberately lit or not. And the people who rushed out of the restaurant are on this side of the road.
I see. So were there many people inside the restaurant?
Yeah, about 15, around about 15 people.
Right, well, Beamy Street is just covered with fire engines tonight, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is.
Two fires tonight here in Campsie, one in the main street, which is a bedding shop, and the other one a little further up the road. Well, apparently there's been a fire in a pizza restaurant, but the smoke is still very thick coming out of the bedding shop, and I'm just moving across the road to look inside. Of course, I'm dodging around flashing red lights. And once across the road, looking down through the front door of the shop, what was first reported to be a furniture factory turned out to be a bedding shop. And what I could see was a line of charred mattresses the full length of the store. There was also obvious evidence of the fire spreading into the bakery next door.
Oh, wow, who are you, the ghost of the 70s? He sort of looked familiar in a strange sort of way. Anyway, that was you, wasn't it? Okay, so I did agree to talking to you about my new book, my 15th book actually, all about the TUE Night Watch program. Between 71 and 76 I hosted. So what made you want to be the host of the Night Watch program? I didn't. No, that was a gesture by Alan Faulkner. Alan Faulkner was the one who brought you to TUE in the first place in 1970, wasn't it? He grew me into the job. He sent me away to cover floods in Walgett and put me into all sorts of situations and offered me a scholarship. We'd called the Australian Journalist Association course in journalism. So I owe him a lot, and I certainly hope I paid it back in many ways by staying on for much longer than the Night Watch program. But Alan was a visionary, they call him. It was Pat Barton, the music director of the time in the 50s for the Lamb family, that came up with the idea that TUE should start a top 40 format. And it was Alan Faulkner who promoted it. Well, he was great. I mean, he gave me the scholarship with the AJA course, and that meant not just radio, but with press and getting in with all the hardened journalists, and I thought, what have I got myself into? So I didn't choose it, no. Alan had really picked me up from 2WL in Wollongong because I was hosting the morning program down there, and in between my shifts I'd go out and I'd cover all the news events, and so he listened to one where I was at an anti-Vietnam rally, and I had a whole bunch of people marching, so I stepped in among the marchers and asked one of the people, obviously from the steelworks that the organisers had gathered together, and I just asked him what the march was about, and he was very reticent to answer, and so I pressed him on it, and he said, "Yeah, you ask me that again, I'll knock your block off." And he would have. He was a muscular guy, and so the March Marshal had to step in and intervene and stop him from hitting me. And it was all recorded, of course, and Alan Faulkner picked that up. And he liked it, even though it went to air on the rival station, 2GB, on their news bulletin. And he said he saw something that he wanted to have me at TUE, and he groomed me. He really did. I mean, with the help of a lot of other people, Ron Hurst, for instance, the program manager at the time, and also people like the journos. I mean, they were such a great bunch of people. Yeah, they were getting long in the tooth. People like Graham Gibbs, there was Glenn London, and the crusty editor himself was Don Angel. And he was a hard taskmaster. It took me 6 years on the practical side until I reached the status of special A journalist. And so many people after I wrote my autobiography have been saying, well, we know there was more to it than what you put in your autobiography, so why don't you do a book just on the Nightwatch program? So I've done that. I actually wrote it in 1978 after I'd stepped down in 1976 from the program, and it was a labour of love because I had the manuscript from that period, which I'd written up on an old typewriter, and it was really, really weird. I had to scan the original manuscript and then lift the characters off. So I used a technology called OCR, which is called, in fact, the long name is optical character recognition. And it allows you to edit the program. No good having the words and not being able to edit them because so many things have changed. I was able to write the words just as they were said to me, and I had to bleep them out when they went to air in the 70s. I wanted to put more of the human interest stories in to counter the real. It was real and raw what I got on that program from the people involved, and so I wanted to balance that by having human interest stories. And I concentrated on that and a few humorous things along the way as well.
Well, some people probably would be a little bit worried about some of these details. I mean, it's violent, isn't it?
Yes, it was violent. It was very violent. Absolutely. And that's why I did the categories, so that you could choose what you felt you were able to take. Don't forget, even though so many people, 255,000 people, listened every Sunday morning at 9 o'clock to the program, I recognise the fact that some people would flinch at some of the topics. And that's why I laid them out so they could skip the ones they felt they wouldn't be comfortable in reading. For instance, the other half I refer to people who are out on Saturday night always thinking of what a great time they're having, and the other half, as I call them, are out doing other things, and I cover the other things, the other half. I talk what sparked violence during that time because there are many tragic stories about the violence. Domestic rows, as we call them now. We call them that, something similar back then anyway. The unintended consequences. I mean, you can start something, but it can lead to something else. Yes, you talk about violence, well, there'd be some people, yes, indeed, yeah. When I talk about murder, of course, that was violent enough. Terrible things happen to people. I cover the street gangs, like the famous Sharpies with their weird haircuts and so forth. But look, this still reflects on some of the youth today as how they get together, and they can be quite violent, so that's covered in the book. And these are from the people, not from just me. With road accidents, yeah, it was a case of don't intrude on the victims. So I got all the ambient sounds, and then I went back to the studio. I'd taken my notes at the scene, and I did my commentary over the ambient sounds. And that's the way it happened. So that I wasn't, just preying on. Of course, there was a recorder running at times over things which were happening when I was the first on the scene before the emergency personnel got there. Fire, well, you've heard a brief clip of that, but there were so many fires and some were very distressing. And I follow that, including bushfires. And trains, I talk about some terrible things that happened on trains.
You have a bit of a commentary running through the chapter on parents and children. What's that all about?
Yeah, parents and children. I watched the way parents and children actually interacted, and some were very disappointing, some were lovely. So I always say that I saw it up close, and I saw some wonderful relationships. I saw some nasty relationships. And I saw the tragic relationships. I talk about drunks. Yep, I went to an AA meeting and I got their opinion, not my opinion, on what leads people to alcohol and spins on to other terrible things. drugs, of course. Drugs were here in Sydney, and so I delve into that world as well. Sometimes it's not just the drug addict who's the victim or portrays themselves as being the victim. It's the relatives, the parents, the friends. It's terribly sad, but it's part of Sydney's history, because nothing's got better on that scene. I like a good ghost story, but no, I'm not convinced by the people I interviewed for the program. They were convincing themselves on many occasions. And, well, that's part of life, isn't it? Especially when you're young and you think you've got a gift. And there are people who actually join the spiritualist church, and they told me their stories, and I didn't make judgment. I just got their version of what they believe as spirits hovering around us. And so that's all part of that particular chapter, The Ghost and Spirits. TUE, under the Lamb family, would not tolerate you going to air and calling a rape for the hideous crime that it really is. But it was changing. And I managed to get it into some of the interviews I did, but I was instructed that you don't say rape, you say a woman's been assaulted, or you could call it an indecent assault. And with centres like the Rape Crisis Centre, they helped a lot to change that attitude, which was crazy. A rape is a rape. And the bikies, well, there's some funny bits in that where they wanted to play a football match. They wanted to play a football match to somehow resolve the differences between the gangs. And I make the point that there's a difference between bikies in the sense that some just want to be like the movies they've seen from that era of the Easy Rider. And they do a lot of work on their bikes, and that's fine, and they don't hurt anybody. But the organised bikie gangs are something entirely different, and it's all in the book. That's what I found out about them. And indeed, I went to a bikie run, an actual bikie run where about over 300 bikie gangs assembled down at Wiseman's Ferry. And I was crazy to do it. I couldn't do it now because they were very violent to each other, and apart from the other things they got up to. But I interviewed people down there, and with the changed community standards now, instead of bleeping out the words are in the book. I've got a few photographs in there about my time hosting the program, but also showing how I try to juggle the relationship with my children. And I only had 2 children, but of course they were affected by what I was doing. I say to everybody now, well, life is like a book, but you don't get to write all the chapters. I decided right from the get-go that I'm not going to just cover every accident. I only covered the very serious accidents, and they're very, very much still etched in my mind. It's now on Amazon, both in the Kindle form, that format, and also the paperback. And they're all available through the Australian Amazon. I do the Kindle version because you have to wait so long for the book to come from America. And so therefore some people, if they're comfortable with computers, like to read it. It's probably best on a tablet, but you can get it on your phone as well. But I've got another book coming early next year on my prostate treatment. So I keep myself busy these days. Not that I didn't during the 70s, but I wouldn't do it again. Thanks for watching.